We can. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to cover or attempt to cover customer service and concentrating on the data structures, but I also wanted to expand on that and talk about some of the common customizations that we see time and time again in projects. So a little bit about me, although Raz has done a brilliant introduction already, really. My blog that's flashing there, if you want to have a look at my blog, you'll find loads of content related to the kind of topics that we're talking about here today. So as Raz mentioned, I do blog a lot about Unified Service Desk, or I used to. More and more these days, though, we're talking about omnichannel for customer service and customer service workspace and general customer service concepts. So the business requirements have remained the same, but the technologies we're using to deliver those solutions has changed quite significantly over the last kind of 18 months, 2 years, and we're now looking at a whole different set of technologies, really. And there's some really exciting stuff in there. And I'm sure a lot of it's coming up today in terms of you're going to be seeing field service, bots, and all sorts of other things. So Raz asked me to do this presentation, and I said, yeah, I'll do something for you. I'll do something on customer service data structures and common customizations, and I'll cover all of that in one session, explain everything, and give you loads of tips and everything. And then I started to work this out and thought that's actually pretty much impossible. That's mission impossible there, because the customer service app is absolutely massive. So rather than trying to cover everything at a really high level, I've chosen certain areas to focus in on and show you a few concepts there and some common, I was going to say the word issues, but not really issues, just common asks from customers about customizations that they'd need. And that led me into then describing these things in a bit more detail. Now, I am conscious that the people that are watching have probably got a very varied kind of background. So some people will be completely new to customer service, some people will know it really well. So I'll try and do bits that appeal to everybody. At least that'll be my attempt. So I'll do some basic kind of demo of customer service to baseline this, but then we'll delve a bit deeper into how we'll actually do the customizations in a real environment. So I'm going to cover a quick demo of the core customer service, as I said. I'm going to do a little bit of theory on the main entities, but I want to keep that down to a minimum because just looking at entity relationship diagrams is going to get very boring very quickly. And then we'll look at the common challenges, and I'll demo you my fixes. Now, I've not done this presentation before, which is reason I slightly tongue-in-cheek put a little clock up there. Raz, please feel free to shout at me at any point if I'm running over. I'm not really sure how long this is going to actually take me, whether I'm going to run short on time or not. But, if I'm running short on time, I'm sorry. But you never know, I might finish early and we can all ask more questions and maybe get a cup of coffee before the next presentation as well. So we'll see how it goes and just play it by ear a bit. So before I get into describing the entities, I thought it might be worth kind of baselining this by showing you the out-of-the-box setup for some of the areas that I'm going to delve into a little more deeply. So those being service level agreements, entitlements, and the basic concepts around what a case is and how we progress cases and resolve cases. So that's the absolute core of the system, really. So let's just jump in. So this is my customer service hub, which is one of, I guess, 3 applications that we typically access the customer service functionality on. So we've got Customer Service Hub, which is the application we all love and know. It's been around in varying forms for a long time. We've also got omnichannel for customer service, which again is very customer service focused, but has got more of a leaning towards channels, so web chats and Facebook Messenger, tweets, SMSs coming in, and then the agents handling those. We've also now got the customer service workspace, which kind of, if I kind of describe that as a hybrid in my mind between omnichannel for customer service, which gives us multiple sessions and is very tailored to the channels, and customer service hub, which is very tailored to, handling the cases and stuff. So customer service workspace actually gives us the best of both worlds. So I do encourage you to start and check out that app as being possibly your go-to interface as we move forward with customer service scenarios. But today I'm going to stick in the customer service hub because that's the kind of baseline application that most people would use. And the way it works is we've got the navigation down the side, and which I'm sure we're all familiar with, and we can get at cases, and we've got a few dashboards and stuff that help our agents find the cases. So these are the active cases that I'm working on it now. Here's the activities I need to be progressing and things like that. Now, before I get into showing you a case, I'm just going to jump into the service management area. Now, this is where we do all of our all our setup, all our settings around how service management is going to work. So in here, we might define queues, we might define our unified routing if we're routing cases or any other entities or even conversations to our agents. And then we've got things like our service level agreements, entitlements and such like, and loads of other stuff. You get the idea. There's a lot in here. And this is why this is mission impossible, because in 1 hour, I cannot dream to attempt to cover all of these options. So let's kick off by having a look at service level agreements. So there's a little bit of Blue Peter going on here. I've created a couple of service level agreements already, and I just want to show you the concept of what a service level agreement is and how we use it. So you can have a default service level agreement. So the default is whenever I create a case, this is the measures, the KPIs that I'm going to have that are going to measure whether I've successfully resolved that case or not. We can then define lots of other service level agreements, and these aren't default. Now, commonly what we'll use is an entitlement to decide that, well, this particular customer gets the gold level of service, not our default level of service, for example. So I'll kind of cover that, the entitlement piece in a minute, and how this gold one will come into play. To give you one real world scenario, your service level agreement's also tied to a calendar. So commonly you might operate 9 to 5. I've recently worked with a customer whose service level agreement was dependent on the working hours and when they could get access to the customer's sites, and that differed with every customer. So they've got an absolute massive number of service level agreements, and every customer would have an entitlement, and it's almost one service level agreement and one entitlement per customer. So you can get into quite a lot of data maintenance in this area, which we'll come back to later. I've got this default service level agreement. So let's have a look at this. So basically, I've got loads of service level items that are in here, and I'll show you one of these in a second. So I've got this top one, for example, and this is going to happen with a low priority case, and I've got different KPIs set up. So the out of the box KPIs are first response. So how quickly do I first respond to a case? Because I've got to acknowledge that you've got that problem. And then my next KPI is resolved by. So how fast am I going to fix that case? So what I'm saying here is for a low priority case, we need to get that acknowledged that we've got that case and we're working on it within 3 days. And after 2 days, we'll start to flag to the customer, flag in some way that we're approaching that 3-day limit. So we don't want to wait till the 3-day limit before we start getting alerts to the fact that we haven't responded to this one. We want to start getting alerts after 2 days. Whenever we look at one of these items, basically they always work the same. There's a few different parameters that goes into each one. First of all, what hours apply? So this one is Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. And in the example I've just shown you, my gold service doesn't work Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. That works 24/7, 7 days a week. So that would be connected to a different calendar potentially. So I'm going to decide when is this service level agreement applicable. So a common way of doing it is on case priority. So I've said here, case priority is low. So this kicks in whenever I generate a case that's got a priority of low. Incidentally, it also re-evaluates the SLA. If I had a high priority one and then somebody reclassifies it as low, it would recalculate the SLA and give me a different time to apply. We then always have to define, well, what does success look like? So there's a flag on the case that says first response sent yes or no. And I basically say, well, if first response has been first response sent has been set to yes, then this particular SLA has been met. Other examples might be, I'll look at the status of the case to see whether it's gone to resolved to know that my resolved by SLA has been met, for example. We can pause SLAs, so we could have an on hold state and say, well, actually, if the case goes to on hold because I'm waiting for the customer to come back to me, let's pause the timer on that SLA until that customer comes back. Or you could let it keep running or not, and basically we can handle whatever combination of that you want. And then I just put in here, when do I want a warning and when do I want a failure state? Now, commonly what I do next is down here in the actions, I click this and I create a flow, or it generates me a cloud flow, and then I'll add in whatever actions that I want. So actions might involve just updating a status on the case to say that it's gone into a non-compliant state because the SLA has been breached. Or it might be that I'll send an email out to the owner of the case, or maybe if it's breached, I'll send an email out to the manager of the owner of the case, or maybe I'll move that case from an active queue into a special high priority queue that we give extra attention to, or something like that. So I can do all those kind of actions within that flow. So that's the concept of an SLA. I've also got this KPI entity. So I can create KPIs, and basically I say, well, first response KPI links to a field called first response KPI on my case, and it's based on when the case is created. So the SLA is calculated from the moment I create the case. Typical other examples might be from when I last modified the case. So when I change the priority, do I recalculate it based on when the case was created or when I just changed that priority? Or I could use custom dates in there. So basically I'm defining what is my KPI going to look like. So all that data comes together and that then gives me the SLA, and I'll show you the impact of that on a case in a second. We've also got a concept of entitlement. Now, I guess you could think of the entitlement in a lot of scenarios of being a bit like a contract. So here I've got a contract with this customer that runs for this date period, so for the rest of this year. And when the SLA that they get is the gold SLA. And this is the default entitlement for this particular customer. So basically what would happen is if this customer has a case, rather than getting the default SLA, they'll get this gold SLA. So that's how we give different customers different SLAs. We don't have to set this as default. So you could have multiple entitlements for one customer because you might have different product sets and people are entitled to different service level agreements and different numbers of cases depending on the type of product that they've got and stuff. So we can get complicated with these. We can also use these to restrict service. So I've set this arbitrarily as just a high number of cases, and I'm not restricting cases being created. But you could say you're allowed a set number of cases or a set amount of time devoted to those cases. And when you reach that limit, we'll stop you being able to create any more cases. And then you'd potentially have to go and buy another entitlement, another contract or something like that. So we can do a lot with this combination of SLAs and entitlements on our cases. So that's showing you the setup. Now let's bring some context to this by showing you how we create a case, and I'll show you what happens with the SLA. So I'm going to go into the cases option and I'll just create a new case. So you'd give your case a title to start with. What will I do? My widget is broken. It's the title. I can optionally give it a subject. I've got this customer field. So there's two mandatory fields on cases, the title and the customer. That's the absolute minimum that you have to create. And this customer being mandatory isn't just mandatory on this form, that's enforced at a kind of database level. It absolutely has to be completed. Now, the concept of the customer field is customer fields in Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform can link to accounts or contacts, so they're not a normal lookup. So in this customer field, I could pick any account or any customer within my system. So I'm going to pick this contact, for example. It shows me which contact I've linked to, and then I'd put a description in, whatever the problem is, and we'll save that. Now, what's happening, or has happened in background, hopefully, if I go to this SLA tab, we can see now that the first response and resolved by SLAs have been created for me. And it says, well, you need to get the first response done by 2/17 on the 12th of January. So I've got quite a long time. And not resolve this until, okay, I've probably set these up a bit weird. Oh no, I've got American formats going on, haven't I? That's the 1st of December or the 9th of December. Sorry about that. I've just, this is just a trial and I've not set my personal options up very well. So basically it calculates my failure times and my warning times, and it's got the status on the SLA, and that status would go to it'd be in progress to start with. As it reaches the warning time, it would go to nearing non-compliance, and then it changes to non-compliance when it reaches the failure time. And as that status changes, that might trigger that Power Automate and would send out emails or do whatever else we want to do. The other thing we've got in cases is the business process flow. So I don't know whether you've seen these before. These are a great guided process to help your agents progress the case. So I can move that forward and I can have research, and you tailor what would go in here. So I'm now researching how to fix this case, and I can move it forward again, and I'd then resolve the case, hopefully. Now, what I'd do in a kind of customization typically is you'd add extra fields into these business stages in the business process flow to say, well, at the research stage, this is what I expect to do, and the agent would have to tick they've done it. So you always end up tailoring this to the customer's requirements, which is a common ask. Isn't one of the ones I'm going to show you, but maybe I should have. Eventually, we get to the point where we're going to resolve the case. And when you say resolve case, we get this standard dialogue that comes up, and we have to put in a resolution. So I've done it. And we have to then put in the amount of time that we've spent on the case. Now, this time is actually calculated from any activities I put against the case. And being a lazy agent, I didn't actually put any activities in there. But it might have calculated, for example, that I'd spent 5 hours on this because I'd got 5 tasks that had taken an hour each or something. I may or may not bill all of that to the customer. So I can, when I'm resolving, say, well, I'm going to bill 3 hours, regardless of what's in the time spent. And I might put a comment in there as to why. So I could use this information later to decide how I'm going to bill my customer. And that's going to resolve my case. And we'll see the status should change from in progress to problem solved, you see? So that's done. Now that's a very high level, very quick kind of summary of how we do cases, but I hope you can kind of see that we've got, you know, a business process flow and varying status as we go in, go through. Now, there are loads of entities related to cases, and it's very common to also create custom entities and such like, but we're not going to cover every entity there is in what we're going to do today. But I do want to cover the core entities that we've actually just seen in action. So everything revolves around the case. And Raz mentioned that you're going to be looking at field service potentially later on. So in field service, there's a lot of commonality in the concepts, but in field service, everything revolves around a work order. So a work order is kind of a ticket for somebody to go out on site, whereas a case is typically resolved internally. Not always, but could be. You see, I've put the word incident in brackets below. That's the schema name for case. So it's one of these kind of examples where Microsoft calls it a case, but under the covers it's called an incident. So if you see the term incident in your data model, it's referring to the case entity, or the case table, we should say. Now, this is where I can then link to a contact or an account on my case as customer. Now, I've not tried to draw this diagram as a true ERD because it would be incredibly complicated. This is slightly conceptual. So each case has a customer, and that customer can be a contact or an account. And usefully, Microsoft have named contact table contact and the account table account, so that they're named correctly a lot of the time. Now, we saw when we created a case, I get an SLA for the case, or I could either get a default entitlement or I could pick one. And if I picked an entitlement, that would update the SLA for me. So I've got this kind of relationship of picking the SLA and the entitlement. Now, when we look at the SLA, each SLA is made up of a number of SLA items. So my basic SLA, I think, had got 6 SLA items because I'd got first response and resolved by priority, and I'd got 3 priorities. So 3 times 2, 6 items. Each item links to a KPI, and that KPI tells me, is this a first response item or a resolve by, and what date is it based on, and such like. So I've got this setup of my SLA. Now what happens then is, once the SLA is assigned to my case, that will generate me a number of SLA KPI instances. So these are the timers, if you like, that go with this particular case. And that's happened because I've assigned this SLA onto that case. We also saw a concept that I resolve the case. There's actually another entity called incident resolution or case resolution that links to the case. Now, the reason this isn't just a status on the case is I've done a very simple demo. In the real world, you might say, yeah, fix that. And then the customer phones back an hour later and says, no, you haven't. So you then reactivate the case and hopefully then re-resolve it. So you could have multiple resolution activities as you go through. So you'd see that history had happened, and those case resolutions actually show in the timeline of the case. So I can see what's been going on the case. So you get quite a lot of detail in this. Now, obviously there's loads more entities, and I've drawn the relationships really just to straight lines. I've done it very simply there, but hopefully you get the idea that these are kind of the core tables that are involved in the customer service instance, and everything revolves around the concept of case. So I wanted to move on to doing some demonstrations of common asks, and this will be where I'm challenging myself. Can I get through this in time? So time and time again in projects, I get common asks, and I'm trying to express these to you in the kind of way that the customer would express it to me. So often I'll be working on agile development projects, and we'll be writing stories, and I assume we're probably all familiar with the concept of a story these days. So as a somebody, as a persona, I need to do something so that whatever, so the who, what, why about the story. And what I need to do as a consultant, as an architect, is define the how. So how am I going to approach this problem, and how are we going to test this problem? So that's commonly what I'm going to address. So we're going to have a look at the requirements, and then I'm going to demonstrate to you the how that I've approached that I would have done for each of these requirements. And they're probably, if you've worked with customer service, I'm hoping, some of these you'll have seen. And obviously, if you're new to customer service, you won't have seen those. So we've got a customer lookup on the case form. I showed you that. You could link to a contact or an account. But a common requirement that comes up for me is the agents that are creating cases need to link all of the cases to an account, not to a contact. And we need to do that because it's the account that's going to pay for the work. And I've set the entitlement up for the account. So I don't want my cases to be linked to a contact accidentally. So I need to force that. So that's a fairly simple modification, you'd have thought. The problem is the customer field is a mandatory lookup on the case, and we can't really control the way that particular kind of lookup works. So we can with an account lookup, but with the customer lookup, we're a little bit more restricted on what we can do with those kind of fields. So I just wanted to show you how I'd force all my cases to be about against account, but still maintain the fact that customer has to be mandatory. And of course, we want to do everything no code. So I've got the wrong thing in front of me. Right. Excuse me, sorry. I'm going to go into make.powerapps.com, and basically I've created a little solution here, and all the changes I'm going to show you today are in this solution. So what we're going to look at to start with, if I go on to my case, I've gone into to do this change. I've gone into columns to start with, and I've added a new column. So I've clicked add column, and then I've created a column that's a lookup to the account, so we can see that here. So if we just have a quick look at this, it's dead straightforward. I've given it a display name of customer account. I've said it's a lookup, and I've linked it to the account table, and I've made it mandatory. So dead easy. I've just said add column, and I've put that in. So that's given me the customer account, but I then need to use that on my forms. So if I go to the forms, all I've done is I've added in the standard form, and I've kept saving it, and I've done a save as, and this is the form I've created to do this customer change. And all we do is we're going to add that field onto the form, and then what we'd do is hide the current customer form, that field. Important comment here, we hide it, we don't remove it. Now, the reason I've done it like that is because of a business rule that I'm going to show you in a moment. So for a business rule to run, all of the fields that I'm going to include in my business rule need to be on the form. So this is my new customer account field that I've just dragged onto the form that we've just seen I've created. And what I'd do is I'd hide this customer field. I haven't actually hidden it at the moment. I've left it, and I've just got to tick this hide button. I've left it on purpose from a demonstration point of view, so we can see that that's actually being set. So again, very simple changes here. And then what I'm going to do is all I have to do is create a business rule, and we'll have a quick look at this business rule. I think, have I got it open already? Yeah, I've got it open already, just save me opening it. So I've got this condition here, and it just says if I've got a customer account, so the customer account field contains data, and all I'm going to do is set the field customer to the field customer account. So even though the customer lookup is a lookup that goes to accounts and contacts, I can still set it to another lookup field as long as that lookup field is to an account or a contact. So then let me show you that working. So all we do is if I create a new case. Now you can see here I've got the case for interactive experience. So what I've done is I've added more forms into my customer service hub. So I created this form. This is the form that I created, and I just did a save as on the basic form. So you can see now I've got a customer account, and then we'll end up, this customer field won't be there. So if I go to my customer account, it can only be accounts. So it forces me to pick an account, and that's going to fill that account. Whatever I put in there will go into here. And if I change the account, it would change in the customer field. So basically now I can hide this customer field, and my agents can no longer add in contacts by accident. So, you know, dead simple change. So the next change is the case number. So the requirements always come looking like this. So as agents creating cases, I want to be able to quote a really nice, simple reference number to my customers. So when they call back, I can quickly find the cases, and they can quote me a nice, easy number. The problem here is, out of the box, the case number has this kind of particular format. So we always get a prefix and then a number and then some letters afterwards. And we can play around with this. We can shorten the number of letters, but we're stuck with this 3 kind of setup. So rather than CAS, I could just put a C or something, but I'm stuck largely with this format. And in my experience, I get a lot of customers who don't want to quote a number that's that complicated to a customer. I just want to give them a number. You know, I don't want to have CAS 1 2 3 4 5 dash ABCD. You know, I want something nice and straightforward. So to do that, but if we just, before I go in here, you can see this out of the box number. This is an example of what the numbers look like, and you can see that they're not necessarily the most user-friendly number in the world. So if I go back to my solution, I've gone to columns and I've created a field that I've called case reference. Now, this is interesting because it's using the auto number data type. So anybody that's worked with Dynamics for a while will no doubt know that we didn't used to have a concept of an auto number field, and there was loads of third-party solutions out there, or people end up having to develop themselves just to generate an auto number. But these days it's dead easy. We just we say we want to add a column, it's an auto number, and then we define what it's going to look like. So I decided not to have a prefix, but I could put one in if I wanted, and I could say how many digits I wanted, and it gives me a preview of what my numbers are going to look like. So it's nice and simple. And then all I do is I go to views and I'd create myself a view, and all I'm going to do is, where it used to say case number, I've taken that out of the view and I've put case reference in. You can see that I've got some existing cases that haven't got a case reference. That's because they were created before this field existed. And then, of course, all I have to do is go to my form. And from a demo point of view, what I've done is create different forms. So I'd go to my form, and where I'd got case number on my form, make this bigger again, I'm going to hide that. And from a demo point of view, I've not hidden it just yet. And I've got the case reference field that I've just dragged on. So it's simple as that. So I've just created a field of a certain type, stuck it on my form. So again, you know, straightforward, common customization. And then if we go and look here, here's my view that's now showing this case reference, nice simple number. And if I create a new case, when I save the case, I've got to put an account in. An account now, no context allowed anymore. You can see that, sorry, I'll do that again. from a demo point of view, I've got to swap onto the correct form. I didn't swap my form, sorry. So pick my customer, and you can see I've got the case reference. When I save this, it's going to give it a case reference number of this, or I could have used this in the past. So instead, I'm just going to quote this number to the customer. So 1000013 is your number, rather than CAS-01018- blah, 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 blah. So obviously a lot easier to use than the out-of-the-box one. So let's look at the next requirement I'd picked to go through. So this one comes up quite often, and I'll explain why in a second. So I'm a company, I'm using cases, but I don't call them cases at the moment. Yeah, I'm implementing Dynamics 365 and I call them inquiries. I call them tickets. And I want to carry on doing what I've always done and use the same words as I've always done. So that's easy. I can just go into the table and I can change the display name from case to call it inquiries, tickets, whatever. So that's dead easy, isn't it? Well, no, it isn't. Because the word case is going to appear all over the place. So I've got a case number field on my case. So the field names are different. I've got charts. There's a chart called case mix that I'd now need to call ticket mix or inquiry mix. All of my views, my active cases would have to be renamed to be my active inquiries, my active tickets. I've got that case resolutions entity that we saw, so I've got to play around with that. There's loads of messages in the system which happen when you try and resolve cases and edit them and things like that. So I've got to go through all those messages and edit them. There's ribbon bar buttons that might have the word case in them. There's tooltips in there, and more. I think we've seen entitlements, for example, and the entitlements restrict the terms based on case. So what do I do with this requirement these days? I really strongly advise my customer not to do it. To get you're implementing Dynamics 365, use the word cases. So it's quite a negative kind of response to this, really. Now, the reason I do this is I've been burnt so many times that I say, yeah, okay, Maureen, the business analyst asked for this, I agree to it. I go and change the main views and stuff, and then it goes through testing scenarios, and the testers keep finding more and more convoluted positions where the word case has appeared and wanting us to change it. And we put a lot of development time into this, and it costs the customer a lot of time and a lot of money to pay for that time. And you think, why? They've got no business benefit out of this. So I'd encourage them strongly to, just they've bought a package. Let's use the terminology that's in it. I won't say I've always managed to get away with that, but this is one that I steer clear of, basically. Case resolution. So this used to be a bugbear, but no longer is. So as an agent closing cases, I need to only record the essential information so I can close cases quickly without wasting any time. So you saw when I resolved the case, it had got billable time in there and stuff and total time spent. But what if I don't charge my customers for individual cases and I don't want to have to record that billable time, for example? Or what if I want to record some additional information? So historically, this was a difficult ask, and was actually quite involved to edit that case resolution dialogue. And actually, we used to have to do some unsupported hacks to do some of the requirements that used to come up. But these days we can control it. So I just wanted to cover off how we do that. So back into my system. So the first thing you do is a configuration change. So if we go into the service management area, under, where's my option? service configuration. You get varying settings, including how my SLA behaves. So here, for example, I can decide which statuses I'm going to hold the SLA on or not. So there's quite a few things in here to look at. If we scroll down, we can see the case resolution dialog is the standard dialog. I've got two other options, a customizable dialog, which will give me something that looks a bit like the standard one, but I can change it, or a quick create form, which mirrors the way a quick create form works when I'm creating contacts and things. I'm going to go for customizable dialog. So I save that, and now when I resolve my case, a different form is going to come up. Now I've done that, I've got the ability to start to edit that. So let's have a look at how we do that. So if I go back to my solution, you can see I've added in the case resolution table that we saw is linked to the case entity. And if we go in here, if I go to forms, there's two forms that I've added in here. I've added in the quick create and the main form. Now, incidentally, what you can't do is create multiple different main forms or quick create forms on this entity. This entity is kind of a little bit special. Some things are restricted on it and I can't edit some things. So I'm limited to the forms that are there, but the forms that are there, I can edit them. So if we have a look at the information form, so again, let me do the zoom. You can see that I've removed some fields. So if we go, if we open this here, you can see I've hidden total time and billable time aren't shown on the form. I've also added this priority column in, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a second. So I can take fields off and add fields into this resolution, and then I can publish this, and this is then available to me, and we're going to see that working. Now, as a quick test, I also said, well, I wanted to make the remarks mandatory in certain circumstances. So I created a business rule. And all I say is, well, if it's a high priority case, I want to make the remarks mandatory. So I create a quick business rule that does that for me. At least I thought that was going to be it. I had a problem with this, which highlighted a challenge with choice fields or option sets within the Dataverse. So let me show you the challenge I had. So if I got it in here. No, let's add the subcomponent into here. Where's priority? Priority code. Let's just add that into my solution. So if I go and look at, doesn't want to add. I'm not surprised. So the first challenge I found is I couldn't edit the priority in here. Let me show you the priority on the case though, because this is where the problem starts. So on my case, I've got a field called priority, and I could do mapping between this field called priority on the case and the field called priority that exists on the case resolution entity out of the box. It's just not normally used. The problem I found though, if you edit the choices, in both fields, I've got low, normal, and high as my priorities. But on the case, if you edit and say view more here, what it stores in the database on the case, normally on the case, for high priority, I think it has a value of 1, and then normal is 2, and then, no, yeah, and low is 3 or something like that. But the priority field, though, that sits on the case resolution, surprise, surprise, has the same text values, but different number values. So what was happening was I'd create a high priority case and it looked like a low priority one in that priority field on my case resolution. And if I created a low priority case, it would look like a high priority one, because what's in the database is this number, not this text. So what I had to do is I edited the values of this priority field on my case. Now that worked for me because I was doing that before anybody had created any cases. if loads of cases had already been created, editing these values would actually change the priorities of all the historic data. So I probably wouldn't want to do that. It might have been I needed a more complicated business rule to, or maybe a Power Automate, maybe a bit of real-time workflow or a bit of code or something to update it, or maybe create a new priority field. So that this uncovered, a really simple problem, but actually Microsoft are not consistent how they're setting up the option sets across the entities. So it's just something to be aware of with choice fields, that if you're mapping a choice field from one entity to another and you get different values in both, just watch out that you could end up with some unpredictable behavior. Eventually, though, I ended up with a business rule that just set my priority as I wanted. Now, let me just show you that working so you get the idea of what we've just done. So now if I go on to my case and I open one of my cases and I want to resolve it, what I'm going to get is a different looking dialog to what we had before. You notice my case is high priority, so it's mapped that high priority field into here. And because this is high priority, my remarks field is now mandatory. So I'll just manually change this so you get the idea. You can see that if it's low priority, I don't have to put the remarks in. If it's high priority, then I do. So I've now customized the way the resolution works. Again, a simple change, but one that has come up in so many projects over the years that in fact comes up in almost every project, that I need to somehow customize the way that resolution works. How am I doing for time? 10 minutes or so. I'll finish and leave maybe 5 minutes for questions. If I'm lucky, I'm reasonably on time at the moment, hopefully. SLAs. So we've seen that we can create an SLA. Now, it's quite common to have a Power Automate that updates something or sends out an alert or something. So common requirement is I want a simple RAG status, so a red, amber, green status on my case that I can see in views rather than just having the whole timer and everything. I want it to be obvious that this case is an amber state or a red state. So I can easily spot which cases need to be looked at. So very simple ask. Except for we've seen that each SLA item triggers a Power Automate. But if I've got large numbers of SLAs and large numbers of items within each of those SLAs, I could have a large number of cloud flows to maintain there to put all these steps into. And this is one that's happened to me recently on a project, which is why I brought this one up. And I came up with a way of having a single cloud flow that would update all of my SLAs rather than it being based on loads and loads of separate flows. So I created just one flow rather than potentially hundreds in the scenario that I'd got. Now, I've given you a link there, and I'll try and show that link again in a minute. If this is something you've got a challenge with, if you copy that link, I have got a blog post that explains the detail of how I did this. So, if you can't remember everything I'm about to show you, don't worry. There's a blog post out there that shows it all. So, first thing I did was I went back into my solution. I created columns. I created 2 columns. So I did a first response one and resolve by, and these are choice fields. And if we have a quick look at these, we edit the choices. You see, I've just pasted in, rather than putting text in, I've just pasted an emoji in, which is another quick tip that, so this looks red, amber, green. And it's the same option set on both of these, so they're sharing that data. So I just created that, and notice it defaults to green, because whenever I create a case, it's in a green state. It's fine. What I then did was a couple of things. I created a view. And on that view, I put in, you see, I put in those two columns so we could see them. So it's nice and easy to see. This has got my case reference as well. So this is getting close to being the kind of view that the customer would want. And then what I did was on my form, all I've done is I've added in those red columns. You can zoom this in. So I'll just put here, I've just put them on my form. Notice I've then made them read only because I don't want agents changing these. These are going to be controlled as a byproduct of my SLA. Notice above here, I have got first response in and resolving. Now they're the timers that show on my case. Now the reason I'm doing this is those timers don't sit on the case. They're actually quick view forms on that other entity, so the case resolution. Whereas these fields are on the case, which means I can include them in the view, whereas I can't put those timers in there. So that's the reason I'm doing this. So then I needed to be able to set these, and I could have gone and maintained my 100 or so Power Automates, my cloud flows if I'd wanted to, but I didn't want to do that. Instead, I'm not going to open, let's go back and let's open that up. I've got a cloud flow here I've created that just updates the SLA. So let's have a look at that. Now this is taking us back to the data model that we'd look. So basically the steps are, all the steps in this are actually quite straightforward, but you've got to have an understanding of that data model that we looked at to start with. So the first thing I say is whenever the SLA KPI instance, when it's first created or when it's modified. Now, the only reason it gets modified after I've created it is because something's changed on it. So therefore its status is going to change. So I want to then have a look at, well, what's it changed to and what am I going to do? So the first thing I do is I always trigger this whenever this SLA KPI instance changes. But once the instance has changed, I need to query the item that it links to. And I'm doing that because I need to then use the field on there to query the which KPI is it that's just changed, which KPI is linked to that item. And then what I do is I also query the case that is regarding. So then I've got into, I've loaded basically all of the data I need. And then I have a switch statement that says, well, if the status of my SLA KPI instance, is it nearing non-compliant or non-compliant? I've put in here. And that this basically status number 2 or number 1. You just have to work out the value of those statuses. What I then do is put another switch statement in here that says, well, which KPI field am I looking at? Is it the first response by or the resolve by? And depending on which one it is, I'll update, this will update a field on the case that I've queried to be amber. This one updates a different field because I've got 2 RAG statuses. And this is just a standard update. So I'm saying, but this is the cases that the field, it's case table I want to do. It's the cases that the row ID. And if we scroll down here somewhere, it's setting this to amber. Yeah. And then I'd have something very similar over here. Sorry, if it's gone non-compliant, and this is going to update it to red, basically. So I'm updating it to amber or red, the right field based on it. So once I'd created that, it was a little bit harder to create this than maintaining all the Power Automates it was generating for me because I had to query all this data up front and build that. But actually the steps as I get further down are pretty much the same as I would have had to have done anyway. But rather than having hundreds and hundreds of Power Automates to maintain, I've got one. And then I can end up with this RAG view that's got red and green. I've got no ambers at the moment because I've talked for too long and my case has gone red whilst we were talking. But you can see the idea that I've got a nice simple view then as to how I'll maintain my SLAs. So, how am I doing for time? Couple of minutes left. I've left the link up there. Hopefully, I've done a few things that resonate with people that have seen before. I've not been able to watch the chat as we've been going through because I'm looking at another screen. So, have we got any questions or anything? Anybody? Raz, are you?
Thank you very much, Neil. Yes, excellent.
I thought you'd gone.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that. So yeah, lots of great comments from the community here. Big thanks from Carsten Groth, I think he's fellow MVP and
Hello,
for
Austin.
Microsoft
I've
Black
not
Belt as
spoken to you
well.
for ages.
Yeah, he's saying it's a pleasure to yeah, it's been a pleasure, Neil, to virtually meet again and to get this overview of the customer service data structures and hopefully to see you again next year. There is a question by Valentino Gasenko.
Yeah.
Hi there, Neil. Great blog, but I can't find a solution to my problem. Can you please tell me what to do? I have a customer service trial where I deployed omnichannel. I created a bot, PVA, which should switch the dialogue to a live operator. If it is required by the client, I added the bot and operator to the same queue, set up the switch, but I can't switch to a live person. I demand this from the bot, but it does not forward the conversation to the operator, and the operator himself
Okay.
from his
Paul,
workspace can take over the dialogue.
I think you've probably seen there is a blog. I've got a blog post about this. It's a bit of a curveball question. It's not related to what I've just been covering, but that's fine. So the way I achieve this in Omnichannel is I set up the skills-based routing to do closest match. I then put both my bot and my human agent into the queue. I give my human agent a skill of human, and my bot obviously hasn't got that skill. So what happens is in my routing, I look for a variable called VA scope. I'm doing this from memory. So there's a context when the bot tries to transfer, there's a context variable. And basically, I say if you've got something in there, I want to route somebody who's a human. And what happens then is it will try and look for a human and route to that. But if there's no humans available, only then would it go to the bot. So I can then switch between one and the other. There's also these days, oh, I'm going to try and do this. This is really off topic. There's also they've made some changes in the omni-channel admin center. So if you're using the new admin center, which you should be by now, because I think the old one might be deprecated. When we look at our chat work streams, sorry everybody if this is way off topic, because for a lot of people this won't make sense because we haven't covered any of this. But if I look at, obviously I haven't prepared this. If I look at my live chat work stream, there is an option in here, I believe. You see here where it says bot. You can add your bot in there. So what's then, rather than putting your bot into the queue, you can put your bot here now. And what's going to happen is you're going to get the bot to start with when we trigger this chat widget. And then if the bot transfers, it will go to anybody that's in the queue. So that makes it a little bit easier for us to use that approach. So have a look at using this add a bot into the queue in the new style omnichannel admin center, because that might answer your question in the most simplest way. Otherwise, look at creative ways you can use skills-based routing for it to prioritize either the bot or the human within the queue. That answered it, hopefully. Any other questions? Is it possible to extract intent of the email through NLP and according automatically assign the case? Oh, right. think you're kind of getting about looking at somebody's sentiment or automatically assigning cases. So I'm actually going to be doing a presentation for Power Platform Ireland later on today, around about 5 o'clock, and that's around using the unified routing option, which we haven't, again, topic we haven't covered today, but the unified routing option can include machine learning, where we can look at a case description or an email description and route the cases accordingly based on what we're picking up in terms of what skills need to be, the agents need to have to be able to resolve those cases. So I think that what I'll cover in that presentation is probably what you're getting at, but it's very hard to give you a quick answer to that because it's quite an involved topic.
Okay, so we've come to the end of the hour there. I'm 2 minutes over.
Yeah,
Big
I get the
thanks
session. We
from
could go with questions for quite a bit longer,
yeah, definitely.
unfortunately.
This is obviously a standard Neil Parker's type session where you got lots of questions and interaction, which is fantastic. A big thank you from Valentine, saying thank you, Neil. Sorry for the off the top question.
That's
But
fine. I like those questions.
yep, awesome. So guys, you've got Neil Park's blog link and contact details there. Thank you, David Wade, for sharing that information. Link to Neil Parker's social media and to his blog. So thanks once again, Neil. We invited you for this very reason because we feel you covering a very important gap and a very popular scenario. So lots of applause for you there, Neil. Do you have any? Obviously, you mentioned you'll be doing a session later on today. Is there any other announcements you'd like to make before you leave?
No, I don't think I haven't got many other sessions coming up. I'm looking forward to Christmas now after that one, I think.
Fantastic, Neil. Well, it was a great pleasure to host you once again, and we all hope to see you in person in the near future.
Okay, brilliant. And I hope to see you soon as well. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. That was Neil Parkes. For those who have not attended Neil's sessions before,